This is Nathan Bowman with Draper Inc. We have our sensor group set up from our motor limit tool. Now we're going to configure our sensors. The first sensor that we're going to configure is the internal sun sensor that we supply here at Draper. So this sensor by default will connect to the top 2 ports on the SSI, the RJ45 ports. If you do need to use more than 2 of these internal sensors, we have adapters that allow you to wire those directly in here. So don't worry, you can have up to 4 sensors of any kind on this. So for the internal sun sensor, it's very simple. We've configured this to where it does the bulk of the programming for you. All you need to do is plug it in. As you can see, I currently have no sensor set up on my SSI. I'm just simply going to take this internal sun sensor, plug it into port 1. I can confirm that I'm receiving power to my sensor because the blue LED inside is on, and then I'm just going to let this sit for a moment, and the internal sun sensor will actually configure itself into the SSI. Very little programming is needed. As you can see, after just a few moments, it changed the sensor port 1 to sun 1, and it is reading at 4%. So the internal sun sensor configures itself. Now, if you want to get more granular with the programming, we can do so. To do that, we're going to hit enter to go into our menu options. We're going to select sensors, sensor 1, and as we can see, just simply by plugging it in, it configures itself in the SSI. So the model is C156282, that's the internal sun sensor. It pre-named itself as sun 1. So I'm going to go down to the parameters because that is what I want to adjust. So by default, the sensor parameters are going to be set up for auto control. This is what 90%, 95% of projects using the internal sun sensor is going to be set up for. What this means is it's automatically going to detect if it's sunny or cloudy, and it's going to move the shades accordingly. So if the threshold exceeds the 50% that currently shows on the screen, the shades will deploy. Once the sun falls below that 50% threshold, the shades will retract automatically. So it's just automatic up and down movement. If you want that to do something else, you simply select the action, hit enter. It will highlight that, and then you can use your up or down arrows to navigate through the various options. Auto control is the default. Privacy would just mean that the shades deploy 100% anytime that the threshold is exceeded. Override open would mean that the shades would default to the up position once the threshold has been met. Override tilt is going to be used for Venetian blinds or louvers. And then range control is where we can set up a range of different values, and the shades will respond differently based on that range. Preset control is where you can set the shades to move to a specific preset based on the sun intensity level. Override close means that the shade would simply come down anytime that the threshold is met. They would not go back up. You would have to move those from a wall switch or something else. And then we're back to auto control. So the threshold is set up by default at 50%. This is where I typically recommend to leave it unless the customer calls back and requests that they be more sensitive or less sensitive. 50% is a good starting point. If you do need to adjust this, you simply navigate down to 50%, hit enter, and then you can use your up or down arrows to navigate the tens and hundreds values of the percentage marker. Moving down to the cloudy delay, this is how long the sensor detects that the sun is below the threshold before it retracts the shades. By default, this is set up for 900 seconds, so 15 minutes, simply because we do not want the shades to constantly go up and down for every passing cloud. So the cloud delay means that the 50% threshold, the sun intensity has to fall below that threshold for 15 solid minutes before the shades will retract. If the sun falls below that threshold for 14 minutes and 52 seconds, and then it exceeds it again, the shades will not move. So just be cognizant of that when you're setting up the cloud delay. If it gets cloudy and your shades don't automatically retract, this could be why, and this may need to be adjusted based on customer preference. Sunny delay is the exact same, however, it's for sun intensity, and that is by default set up at 5 seconds because we want the shades to respond instantaneously as soon as the threshold is exceeded. Again, this is customizable based on customer preference. those are the parameters that you can set up for the internal sensor. So now I'm going to go back to the previous menu. As you can see, this is currently set up as a master group. We do not want that set up as a master group, so we're going to hit enter. Then we can set this up as a master, custom, or global group. If you select custom, the system is going to one by one jog through the shades, and you're going to have to do the previous add skip method with the original IntelliFlex IO programming instructions. However, if you have set up your groups through your motor limit tool, as we have previously done, you're going to assign those to the global groups. So if you remember, we set up our motor in groups 1, 2, and 4. So for this particular sensor, I want it to be in part of group 1. So I'm going to navigate down to global group 1, hit enter, and it's going to save that information. Perfect. From there, it takes me back to my sensor menu. It shows me my sensor is set up, and it shows me that it is part of global group 1. My sensor is now configured. I am good to go. One thing to note on this sensor is there is a dial on the back of it. By default, we ship this sensor with the dial in the middle position, or 10,000 lux, 10K lux. Based on customer preference, if they would like it more sensitive or less sensitive, you can adjust this dial to be more or less sensitive to sun intensity. But by default, we leave it in the middle of the road setting at 10K lux. Off to the right, you have 1K lux, and then off to the left, you have 100K lux. If the arrow is directly up, that means the sensor is off. It's never going to read. So if you get on site and your SSI is reading 0%, one thing I recommend is checking this dial to ensure that it is not turned to the off position. Thanks for watching. If you have any more questions or concerns, please contact Draper Technical Support at 1-800-238-7999 and select option 3.